Welcome back to your dissection videos. Today's videos are going to revolve around our pretty little fetal pig, and this is going to be the first of two videos. This one is going to focus on the external anatomy of our fetal pig and the head, mouth, and neck of our fetal pig. So let's begin by looking at some of those external features. First, let's learn how to tell the sex of our fetal pig.
All right, the first place that you want to look to try to determine the gender of your pig, and it's a little tough here because we've already started cutting this one open, but just underneath where the umbilical cord comes out, these are fetal pigs, so they hadn't been born yet. They still had their umbilical cord attached. But just underneath there, in this area, would be a urogenital opening if you have a male pig. Female pigs don't have that, and it's just continuous skin. You also want to look under the tail of your pig. So if you look under the tail in a male pig, there would be a bulging area, which is the scrotum, which houses the testes. But in a female pig, there's a fleshy appendage, which is called the genital papilla, which is the exit for reproductive and urinary materials. So obviously with this genital papilla back here, we've got a female pig.
Make sure you can identify male versus female pigs.
And there are pictures on your eLearn PowerPoints of the male versus the female pig side by side so that you can see the difference between the two. I feel very strongly like you might need to know that. Very strongly. Very, very, very strongly. All right, anyway. So pigs are tetrapods, which means they have 4 limbs. So they do have the 2 front limbs, or 4 limbs, and the 2 hind limbs, or the back limbs back here, back legs. Notice that the whole body's covered with hair. That these guys are mammals, so obviously they're going to have some hair on them. The other thing on the trunk that I want to mention, again, it's kind of hard to tell just because this pig has already been cut into a bit, but there are teats down the chest or the torso of your pig. Teats are also a mammalian structure that is where the mammary glands would provide nourishment for the babies. And this is a female pig with the teats, but male pigs also have those structures. So, all right. Last but not least, we have the head, and there are several things that we wanted to notice on the head. The first of those are these large ear flaps. They have the same name as your ear flaps. They're called the pinna, and they're shaped like a funnel because they funnel sounds down into that auditory canal. Pigs also have eyes on the sides of their head, just like the frogs and the squid and the sharks that we've dissected before, that help them see what's going on around them in their environment. It gives them a pretty wide optical range, but they don't really see so well right directly in front of them. That's a little bit harder to do. They got to turn their head for that. The snout on our pig, of course, is sensory, and you can see the nostrils on either side. And these guys do have their tongue sticking out. Notice there are these little fleshy papillae along the sides of their tongue for sensory. These guys are rooting around in the mud. They need to feel what they can feel as best they can. So those are sensory, as are the hairs on their chinny chin chin. So these are called vibrissae, and they're sensory as well. I think that's pretty much it on the outside of our pig's head. Oh, one more thing about the pig's mouth. The placement of the mouth is sort of similar in the pig as it is in the shark. It's called subterminal, which means it's not quite at the end. It's just underneath the end of the mouth. So they kind of have to lift their snout up in order to eat. Sharks do that too. All right, now we're inside of the mouth. And inside of the mouth, there are some teeth on either side. Let me move that gunk out of the way there. These teeth are really, really sharp. These guys are omnivores. Pigs will eat just about anything. So they do need some teeth in there to help tear things apart. So you can see them on either side. We also have hard palate up here in the front and soft palate just behind that. You also have hard palate in the front up next to your teeth. It's called hard palate because there's bone underneath. It's really important to separate the mouth from the nasal cavity. And we tend to put our tongue up there when we're talking a lot because it helps us to form the words that we need to form.
Go ahead and stick your tongue up behind your teeth. You can feel that hard palate.
If you've ever heard of a cleft palate before, that means that the bones that are underneath here didn't fuse like they're supposed to during development, and there's an opening that leads up into the nasal cavity. A lot of times that causes problems with eating. The food goes up into the nose, and you have a hard time getting that down into the throat where it's supposed to go. So it has to be surgically repaired a lot of the time in order for the person to be able to eat properly, get the nutrients that they need. Behind that is soft palate. This is just membrane and muscle, and it moves. It actually moves back when you swallow to cover this opening right here that leads up into your nasal cavity. So this is called the nasopharynx back here. And that leads up into the nose. So we don't want food to go up there. Every time you swallow, this soft palate moves back and closes that hole off. Otherwise, every time you took a drink of something, it would come out your nose. And trust me, that is not a pleasant experience. We have this kind of curled U-shaped structure. This is called the epiglottis, and the epiglottis's job is to cover the opening down into the airway. So in between those folds is the glottis. That's the hole down into the windpipe. You don't want food going down in there either, so every time you swallow, that little curl covers up that opening. So the food moves instead into the digestive tract, which is back here just a little bit. It's a little hard to get to, but it's behind the airway down in here. So nasopharynx, esophagus, epiglottis, and glottis are in the back of the throat back here. While I'm here and I'm looking at it, these pigs have also been injected with that latex dye that the sharks were injected with so that it keeps the blood vessels open. So you'll notice the pink and blue strings inside here. That is not normally there. Those would be blood vessels, and that latex dye has the consistency of like gloves that you wear to dissect with, so it's kind of stretchy and rubbery. And it's pretty colors. They usually do pink in the arteries and blue in the veins. Not because you have blue blood, because you don't, but just so that you can tell the difference between the oxygenated blood in the arteries and the deoxygenated blood in the veins. All right, last spot on this video is in the neck. So when you start dissecting into the neck, I always tell my students to feel, and I know you guys can't do that on a video, but when you start cutting in there, you don't want to cut too deep. So the first thing that you'll notice right here is this, looks like a marble in the throat. That's a ball of cartilage, which is the larynx or the voice box. So there's vocal cords in there. Pigs do vocalize. Oink, oink, oink. Just like that. And so that sound comes from here. You also have a voice box. If you put your hand on your throat and you swallow, you can feel that voice box bob up and down as you swallow.
And that's also the Adam's apple that we see in males. Once they hit puberty, that testosterone's wreaking havoc on everything. It causes that voice box to flatten out, giving them a deeper range of sounds. And so that flattening out is what gives us that protrusion or that Adam's apple.
On either side of the voice box, you'll notice a gland, and that gland kind of wraps, we've cut a little bit, but it wraps around the underside of the voice box. You have one there too, that is called your thyroid gland, and thyroid gland makes hormones that are responsible for your metabolism. So if you've ever heard of hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, that means these glands are underproducing or overproducing the hormones that they're supposed to be making for you. And that causes a whole host of other symptoms that go along with that. So thyroid is in the neck. One last thing.
I can see the cartilage rings.
Can you see them? Okay, good. This is another one that I always make people feel with your finger, especially with the fingernail. This is your voice box, or sorry.
Trachea.
There you go, thank you. Oh, Lord, been out of school too long. This is your trachea or your windpipe, and it's held open by C-shaped cartilage rings. So you can see those rings on there that are keeping it open. And the open part of the C is actually in the back there, because just behind your trachea is your esophagus. And that means the food's going to be going down behind here, and you don't want the food to be going all the way down through there. So instead, we're just going to have the open part of the C back there so that there's a nice smooth tunnel for the food to travel through. But this airway is always open with those cartilage rings on there. And it does lead down and branch. Once it branches, it's no longer trachea. It becomes the left and right bronchi.
All right, so let's trace that path of oxygen through this little pig based on what we have discussed. So where would that oxygen enter our pig?
It can come in a couple different ways. It could either go through the nose or the mouth. But either way, it's going to end up back here in the throat where it meets into the glottis. That's the opening down into the airway, which was called the trachea. So we got the larynx or voice box just above that, and then the trachea, which comes down and branches into the left and right primary bronchus.
And those bronchus then branch even further into bronchioles and lastly alveoli. But those bronchus, bronchioles, and alveoli make up the lungs of our little pig. And we will talk all about those lungs in our next video.